So Kent, we're going to go for the hero demo of the Dataverse plugins that came out at Microsoft Build. So this is the prompt that I'm going to run through GitHub Copilot. So we're going to connect to our Dataverse environment. We're going to create a simple solution, and this is based on a CSV file that I've had Copilot generate. Let me just pull that up real quick. So this is our hero demo, and so we've got some accounts, got health reviews, we got risks. So this is what we're going to create and add to our solution.
Makes sense.
Yep. So I've told it to create a solution. So it's going to be Kent Nathan demo. We're going to use the Nathan Rose publisher so we get that proper prefix on our tables. It's going to add relationships. It's going to create a main form and views. And it's going to add all the fields that it's created to the forms. So massive time saver for us. Then I've asked it to create a model-driven app called Kent Nathan Demo with all of the tables, forms, and views, add it to our solution, import the data from our CSV, and then so I've asked it to show me customers. When I tried this didn't happen. So we'll see if this happens. Create a security model. And then the most exciting part is I've asked it to put it in a solution and deploy it as managed to another environment. So stuff that used to take us quite a bit of time, we're going to do in a single prompt using the Dataverse plugins. So now a quick call out, if we were doing this for real, after we've added things to the solution, created the model-driven app, in the real world, I'd want to have a break in the action and do some unit testing. And you could do this if you had a skill for Playwright MCP server, something that I'm still kind of getting my head around. I've seen it done, but it's not something I've done. But just in terms of showing just the full capability of what we can do with the plugins, we're going to go for the hero demo, albeit slightly irresponsible, not something that we would actually do in a real project yet. Cool. So that's our prompt. Any call outs that you want to make, Kent, before we
So one thing, so CSVs are traditionally, quite easy to import.
Yep.
But I just wanted to call out, it doesn't actually have to be a CSV. So it's
Okay.
great, like this will work. But it can also just be Excel files too, right? And
Oh,
I think
nice.
some of the challenges historically is like you need to sort of provide metadata around like, hey, what do all of the columns need? But
Yep.
using coding agents like GitHub Copilot, Cloud Code would be the same thing, is that they can actually dynamically write Python code and use Python libraries to crack open Excel documents and actually parse the data. So
Oh, wow.
if you've never done that, that's a fun exercise as well.
Yeah.
And it's super powerful because you don't have to describe anything. It'll
Yep.
figure things out, and then it'll also line up against your destination table schema,
Yeah.
and actually pump it into the right columns. It's actually it's pretty cool.
Oh, awesome. Cool. So I'm going to copy this. And now the way I did this last night when I was prepping for this was I just used the GitHub Copilot chat, but you were just showing me the CLI. So do you want to talk us through the CLI and what this is going to let us do?
Yeah, I'm trying to convert you. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with either one. Just
Yep.
the CLI just tends to be kind of, I guess, more in vogue these days.
Yep.
And it's one of those things where the agent chat is kind of good and it's very sort of interactive. But I
Yep.
find the CLI, once you start using it, you just get used to it as well. And so one thing that we're going to do here is we're going to get into plan mode, which I can see
Yep.
you're already in. And
Yep.
if you're following along at home, people, you can shift tab across the different modes. You've got plan, you've got autopilot, and you've got interactive mode. So interactive
Yep.
would be more like, you're having this conversation with the agent. And then autopilot is naturally kind of, also call it YOLO mode.
Yep.
But the idea is when you use planning in conjunction with autopilot, it's actually a good practice. So we'll
Yep.
go through plan,
All right.
and basically our coding agent in conjunction with the Dataverse plugin is going to come up with a kind of like a to-do list, and it's going to
Yep.
break down everything that you had in your prompt, and it's actually going to go design that. So sometimes
Okay.
people talk about like, oh, this is vibe coding. I can't trust vibe coding. Well, they're probably just doing autopilot where it's like, no,
Yep.
no, we're actually getting into a planning mode. So this would be
Yep.
no different if you were working with a colleague doing some peer programming
Yep.
and you're like, hey, let's go build this particular solution. And then you have a dialogue about like, well,
Yep.
should this value be and how should we approach this and what do we need to include? That's essentially what plan mode is going to be. And it's a best practice, and it's also helps you reduce your token usage
Yep. Okay.
because there's less refactoring. And then the other thing that you can do is like once you got your plan in place and you're happy,
Yep.
throw it on autopilot mode, go grab a coffee or whatever, and let the machine do its work, and you'll come back
Love it.
and you should have a solution that aligns to the planning session that you just had with the agent.
Awesome. Okay, well let's put our prompt in. So there's our prompt. And so I'll just hit return.
Yep.
And so these would be all of the questions and prompts that I got when I was in chat mode, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it works very similar. Like under the hood, there's a lot of sort of shared
Yep.
technology across the two.
Yep.
So it's not like you're kind of giving up a lot, I would say, but it's just more of just a different type of
Yep.
interface. So the other thing you can start to do is like if you do need to create multiple terminal sort of tabs because maybe you want to sort of issue some commands yourself, you can do that by
Yep.
just clicking on that plus sign in that kind of the, upper right hand corner. So you can start to manage more of those things in the same way. But
Yep.
at the end of the day, you have a choice over your model. In this case, you're using Sonnet 4.6,
Yep.
and you're going to leverage the GitHub Copilot tech under the hood.
So are these credits consumed now, or are these credits it predicts it will consume once it runs this in autopilot?
So yeah, that number was zero. So
Yep.
when we started, so that I believe would be usage that consumed at this point. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, but I'm seeing a lot of the questions that I got last night when it was prompting me for this is very cool.
Yeah, and what's happening under the hood here as well. So we've got the obviously we've got GitHub Copilot here, and then you've installed the plugin, the Dataverse plugin for coding agents,
Yep.
and we ship skills as part of that plugin experience. And so those skills have kind of like hints, pointers, context, whatever you want to call it, that will lend itself to directing the coding agent to make the right call
Yep.
for a particular tool, right? So there's going to be certain things where it's like, hey, you said you wanted to create a solution. Well, that's actually going to
Yep.
route to the PAC CLI.
Yep.
You mentioned that you wanted to import data. Well, that's going to route to the Python SDK. And
Yep.
so these are things that's super important to understand because like that complexity is abstracted away from you.
Yeah.
Like you could do all of this yourself, prior to coding agents, but you needed to have a firm understanding of what is all of the syntax, what are all of
Yep.
the tools that are available to you, versus this setup. What's
Yep.
happening is that the agent in conjunction with the skills is going to orchestrate
Yep.
making the right calls as well.
Yeah. Now, quick question, Kent. So, let's say as I'm reviewing this plan that it's putting together, if I see something that I don't like or I don't agree with or, that I want to change, can I break in and, because I see it's working here in the background, is it possible for me to break in and say, actually, you need to do this first or just to, because we do want to make the distinction that we're not just purely vibe coding.
So this is actually quite timely. So So you technically could break it. Like if you hit
Yep.
escape, and sometimes you have to hit it a couple times, it'll break
Yep.
it. I would say
Yep.
like, unless you had a very long job, I'd probably just let it play out. And
Yep.
then this is your opportunity to go back
Yep.
and make some changes, right? So at the bottom there, if you arrow down and you hover over 4 and then you hit
Yep.
enter, then you could go ahead and start sort of giving it feedback.
Okay.
The other thing that happened, I don't know, was rather
Okay.
subtle, but there was a plan.md file that was created.
Yep.
And so after you've kind of completed all of this feedback,
Yep.
you could go ahead and save that plan.md.
Okay. Was that
And
the
uh, actually, if you scroll back up, it probably will tell you exactly the path.
Yep.
Because I saw it show up. If you scroll, uh, yeah, if you scroll the window up, it should. Because sometimes it'll create right there. It gets created in your session. So this is
Okay.
a Copilot session. Now you could say,
Yep.
write that plan.md to. Oftentimes people will create like a specs folder
Yep.
inside of their project, and so you could just say write the plan.md over to the specs folder, and then you
Yep.
could put that in source code. This is in like your session. Like every time you go into Copilot CLI here and you start a
Yep.
chat, you have some persistence that takes place
Yep.
on disk and then also in a SQLite server behind the scenes. But
Yeah.
that's how you could sort of navigate that as well. But you mentioned, hey, like when I was running this last night, I was asked the same questions. Well, if you had this plan in place now that it's generated and you ran this
Yep.
again and you would say you leverage the plan,
Yep.
it's going to go through far less discovery
Yep.
and it won't
Use less
burn as many
tokens.
tokens because
Yep.
you've already short circuited that. You've already sort
Yep.
of,
Yeah.
you know,
And
taken a shortcut.
yep.
So.
And presumably faster. Um,
And yeah, and so like that's another I think tip like is as people are sort of building out solutions in sort of a team environment, if
yep.
you've once you get to this, you could turn that plan.md also into a skill, which is kind of the same thing where it's like, hey, this is a markdown file that gives context and instructions.
Yep.
And then if everyone on your team is sharing that file, then
Yep.
that's going to lead to more consistent solutions that align to your corporate standards or best practices.
Okay. Cool. So let's go ahead and save this plan.
Yeah, so just in the type it, just say suggest changes, just say, hey, go ahead and save the plan.md to whatever, wherever you want to save it.
Um, let's put it under, let's put it here in the VS Code workspace. Actually, no, let's put it in the Nathan demo. So I need to copy that. That. All right. And just hit return.
Yep.
All right. So it's going to save our plan for us. Yeah, this is very exciting stuff. When you think about the time this used to take in a WYSIWYG, that we can just, do the thinking, interact with the agent, and it's going to go and do kind of all the what used to be pointing and clicking and whatnot. Awesome. Okay, so we've got the plan.markdown.
Yeah, so you'll just select yes, or even
Yes.
number 2 as well if you have subsequent file operations.
Hang on, I think I'm,
I probably just need to click in there and then it'll.
yeah. Go. Don't ask me again. Okay. Sweet. So now that we've got our plan, are we ready to move to autopilot mode once this has done its thing?
Yeah, so even it's an option here, right? So So yeah, it's going to say there's 11 different steps, and
Yep.
these are the order it's going to go do it in. And
Yep.
yeah, like if you're good,
Yep.
then yeah, just
Yep.
hit
I'm
enter,
happy
and
with it.
it'll
Um,
flip to that autopilot mode and execute.
quick question. So I've got a CSV that last night I added here to the Copilot chat. Is it going to prompt me for that in the
I
CLI?
guess if it can, I would be willing to bet because it's in the project, it'll find
Yep.
it because it can find it
Okay.
there. So it's pretty good about doing things like
Okay.
that.
Yep.
If it can't, it should
Yep.
prompt you for it.
Okay.
But yeah, it should when it's you're
Yeah.
working in the context of a project, it's usually pretty good about finding things.
Okay.
It'll use
Cool.
like regular expressions to go find it.
Oh, nice. Okay. Well, let's accept and build on Autopilot and let's see what happens. Okay. So
Uh,
presumably this is now running in the background.
so it just wants consent around permissions. And so, like, since you're watching this and you've got a good understanding of what it's about to do, you could just say enable all permissions. If
Where's it
you, this
asking me
is
for that?
just right, it says enable autopilot mode. So just hit enter.
Okay.
Yeah. If you had kind of were new, like you'd never gone through the process before, then you may want to watch and see what it's asking you to do. But
Yep.
in this case, it's pretty safe. And then here we can see there's a skill being loaded, that DB connect.
Yep.
And so that's going to go figure out how to go connect the Dataverse and hand
Yep.
off to the PAC CLI. So now we can see the PAC
Yep.
CLI starting to run,
Yep.
and it's
Yeah.
connected to the current org. And now we've got the Python SDK.
Yep. And
That's
some of these Python scripts it would have written last night, I noticed that it dropped a bunch into the project.
yeah, that's another good point too. So sometimes people they get a little bit concerned about, oh, like, is this vibe coding? Is this non-deterministic? Is this going to do a bunch of weird stuff? And, so you could go like review those Python scripts
Yep.
if you want. And you could even, like, once you've generated them and wanted to maybe run those in another
Yep.
environment, you could do that too, right? So just from a command
Yeah.
line. So
All right. So I want to
it
do
does
this.
create a deterministic step for you.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to do this in a different org manually. So I'll hit enter and it's going to ask me for that, I'm assuming. Pop that in. Yeah. Now this should pop up a authentication window. There
Now
we go.
okay, there it is. Yeah.
And here we go. Do my 2FA thing. Awesome sauce. Nice. So we have authenticated. And let's see, is it going to find the CSV?
Yeah, it's still working through the authentication. It
Okay.
saves um, information into a .env file so that,
Okay.
for subsequent calls, because it's going to be doing that through like, either a shell or an SDK that it can actually go do that and not
Yeah.
prompt you every time it tries to go do that. But yeah,
Yeah.
you've now connected, and so now it's going to the next step
Yep.
in the process.
Script. Yep. So these would have been the scripts that it generated last night, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it likely was. It's hard to say without seeing timestamps, but
Yeah.
yeah, this is all normal where there's especially when we think about SDKs being used,
Yep.
then Python is kind of the language of choice to go do a
Yep.
lot of those things. And
Yeah.
the cool thing is you don't have to know anything about Python.
Yep.
It's something where it, we'll go sort of build that, and
Yeah.
in the unlikely event it fails, like you just tell it to go fix it, and
Yeah.
chances are it'll figure that out as well.
What's really exciting, Kent, to me is seeing this all come together because last year, we did a lot of work with Dataverse MCP, and that on its own was really cool. And then earlier this year, some work on the Python SDK for Dataverse, and now seeing this, it's kind of cool to kind of see it all coming together in these coding agents, because it was like, yeah, these things are cool on their own, but now seeing MCP working in conjunction with Python to then go and build this stuff in Dataverse, stuff that, we is kind of the core of any project and delivery, and stuff that, again, has, typically it takes a lot of time to, get your tables built and whatnot, take a junior quite a bit of time. And to see this stuff kind of all happening agentically is really exciting, to, kind of, it's like, when you're on a hike and you kind of break through the trees and you get the view and you're like, wow.
And I think the other thing is it like lowers the barrier of entry for sure.
Yeah,
Because it's like one of those things where if you're new to Dataverse, and especially you start to get into some things like say plugins
yep,
as well, you like there's a steep learning curve to go sort of figure
yep,
out a lot of those things. And
yeah,
this is where I would really just encourage dev teams to contribute their sort of shared knowledge, like contribute
yep,
to your shared repository of skills
yep,
so that things can be done very consistently. And I
yeah,
think that's just a good practice, and I think that will save everyone time, and then also just address those concerns of like, oh, did the agent hallucinate, or is
yep,
it going to go off the rails and do some stuff it's not supposed to do? Well, that is how you impose your guardrails,
yep,
and that's just I think good for
yeah,
everyone, right?
yeah. So one question I do have, Kent, is for guys like you and me that, have done this stuff manually for years, we've kind of been, kind of hands in the soil. So for us, it's very exciting that we can do it faster because we understand Dataverse from that kind of ground up. What how should we be thinking about this for people who come after us that, haven't had to go and build tables and relationships between them? Are we going to is the agent going to have some knowledge around this is what good looks like? And so if the user says, you know, I want you to create a many-to-many relationship where actually I need to modify parameters on the intersection, where, hey, that's a bad idea because you're not going to be able to do that. And those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think one sort of underutilized or underestimated sort of technique is this notion of reverse prompting.
Hmm.
So I think if someone's sort of new to sort of the platform and just in general, yeah, it can be tempting to just kind of hit the easy button and,
Yep.
do the whole YOLO and autopilot and just
Yep.
like do all this stuff. But do take the time to understand things.
Yeah.
And so you can use reverse prompting to
Yep.
help with that. So it's like, you're basically asking for like remove the blind spots. So it's like,
Yeah.
hey, how can I make this better?
Yep.
Or explain this to me. Like,
Yep.
why do you feel that this is the way it should be?
Yep.
And I'll do this all the time where, because like, yeah, I couldn't write a lot of Python, but like something
Yep.
comes up and I'm like, well, how does this work?
Yeah.
Because I want to be able to explain it to someone. That's, I think, the key thing where it's like,
Yep.
using these coding agents are great, but if you can't
Yep.
explain what happened, why, and how,
Yep.
then you're kind of complicit. I think at the
Yep.
end of the day, you know, developers, engineers are responsible for the code that is being
Yep.
generated.
Oh,
So
100%.
it's not enough to just say, oh, well, sorry, I used a coding agent to go do that. Well, it's like,
Yep.
No, you own the outcome, not
Yep.
the coding agent. So
Yep.
it's up to you to really figure that out. So that's where people,
Yep.
can do things quite quickly, and it's a lot of fun, and it's really rewarding to quickly move through these use cases. But
Yep.
you do also need to take a step back and
Yep.
review it. So I'll always be like, summarize what you did,
Yep.
and also you do need to watch these things too. Like, why did you do that? I
Yep.
find like, especially when you run into errors or like issues,
Yep.
these coding agents will take the shortcut,
Yep.
and they will want you to do things manually, or
Yep.
they will make up excuses,
Yep.
and it's like, tell me why you think that way,
Yeah.
so I'll do things like that as well, because they aim to please,
Yep.
but they also, I think, aim to get things done quickly, and sometimes I'd
Yep.
say that's too quick as well.
Yeah. It's funny how human AI really is at times, taking shortcuts.
Yeah, we'll just do this one manually. It's okay. Just this one until you do the next one manually, and then the
Yep.
next one, and then,
Yep.
So yeah, I know it
Yeah.
is true.
Yeah. So it looks like it's created our elements, and it's adding fields to the form. And it's really cool just getting this play by play as it goes through it. So it's editing our form. So if I go into our environment, let's just go over here to, this is the environment I'm populating this in. So here's our solution. It's working on it now. And give this a second to load, but we should start to see some solution elements in here. It's very, very cool getting to kind of see this happen in real time as the agent works through it. Yeah. So we've got our 4 tables. We got columns. So yeah, it's working through this. All right, now it looks like it's working on the model-driven app. Nice. Added all of our custom columns to the forms, creating our model-driven app. This is amazing because we kicked this off, what, about 15 minutes ago. And I mean, this is, if I was working in the WYSIWYG, all right, in the comments, I know somebody's going to say it wouldn't take me that long, but right, it's the eternal argument between clients, service leads, project managers, how long something should take. But let's just agree that it wouldn't take 15 minutes to do all of this. I don't care how good you are. It would not be 15 minutes. So, especially because, human developers need to stop and caffeinate. So,
That's true.
yeah, it's the core of any good project, right? Is a coffee or three. Okay, what's it doing now? Uh, looks like it's getting an error, but it's solving it. This is one of the things that really excites me is when it runs into errors, just watching it solve problems the way a human would. Like, okay, I'm getting this error. Let me go search the SDK. Let me look at other things in the environment. Most of the time it's able to resolve it. And it does it pretty quickly.
And this is also something that I've found quite useful with these coding agents too. And it's sort of a little bit orthogonal to Dataverse, but
Yeah.
like even Azure, right? Like, yeah, back when I was on the Logic Apps team, right? So you
Yep.
go into the Azure portal and you're getting some sort of error code from somewhere, right?
Yep.
It's just like being able to like copy paste that, throwing that into a coding agent, and
Yeah.
then be able to say like, help me troubleshoot this.
Yep.
And what's pretty interesting is it's doing similar to what you just saw there, where it's like, it goes and fetches like the spec or the schema for like the
Yeah.
SDK or the CLI, and
Yep.
then it's going to go work through these things. And I think we've all probably been there where it's like, oh, we're copy and pasting, we're like downloading
Yep.
this commandlet, we're trying to call this REST API, it's out of
Yep.
date, we're like we don't know where, like, and it's just
Yep.
like the most frustrating thing on the planet.
Yep.
And this like takes care of a lot of that headache for you. So I say, like, it's not just developers that should have these tools, it's also like your IT admins
Yep.
should have these tools. And like security folks, if you've got security analysts, things like that, they should also have access to these tools because they're just so powerful in what they can do.
Yeah. Um, wow, it's even creating an icon for our app. Very, very cool. One thing I have not tried with this, with custom tables, something that I'm super picky on is having icons for my custom tables. And, it's something, I can do in 5 minutes manually, but it would be cool to try it with this to see if it could suggest an icon and create that SVG web resource for you.
Hmm. Yeah, like I haven't tried it myself, but I suspect it probably can. Like if
Yeah.
something's exposed through an API,
Yep.
or an SDK like
Yep.
module, like it's possible, right? And then it's just like it's also like the power of coding agents where you could say
Yeah.
like, well, a coding agent can go build you an SVG, right? So, the Dataverse plugin is not going to help you with that, but
Yep.
GitHub or Claude can help you with that. And
Yeah.
then it sort of, brings these things together, which is pretty awesome too, right? Like we're never designed like to work together like that, but
Yep.
just the way it works. So,
Yeah. Okay, it looks like it's still creating the model-driven app. So it created the app module. Okay, so I don't see it in the solution, but maybe it's in our list of apps in the environment. Let's take a look and see. Yeah, it is. So it's created the model-driven app. We can't play it, so it's still in the process of working through it, but it did it. Now I won't click edit just because I don't want to interfere with anything that the agent is doing. Okay, what's it doing? It's running some kind of function. Wonder if it's trying to add it to the solution, if
well, I
that's what
think it
it's
was making an edit. Still writing function.
stall query.
It said something about a filter. The app was created in the previous run. The query is returning empty, likely a privileged filter. Let me update to handle that already exists case gracefully and query without a filter as fallback. So it looks like it's doing some sort of conditional logic.
Yeah.
And so this
Is
would
age
be
restricted.
an opportunity, like as it's sort of iterating through this, and
Yep.
pretty confident we'll get this sorted. But
Yep.
we can ask it, okay, like what did you learn from this?
Yep.
And document that.
Yep.
And that could be part of your skill, right? So then maybe you've
Yep.
got like, oh, model driven, app
Yep.
with solution skill, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
that the learnings that you've gone through here could be persisted
Yep.
and then leveraged in the future, and
Yep.
you wouldn't have to go through this
Yeah.
iteration.
Yeah. Or even if there's things that's just not possible, if you've got it in your prompt, you could say, I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Yep.
So it looks like it's a GUID filter. Um, App was not added to the solution, but it was created. Directly get the app by its known ID. If it does, use that and proceed. So this is really cool, watching it learn in real time and problem solve. That to me is one of the most exciting parts of um, agents. So it's writing code in real time, writing scripts. Yeah, Ken, I think you've converted me to the CLI. This is very cool. A couple years ago, Rami Moonla converted me to it for Power FX. Before our session, I thought PAC CLI was a detective series on Netflix, but yeah, he showed me how to use it, and I was completely hooked. So
Now there's one thing that is pretty cool that does pull me out of the PAX, or sorry, the CLI,
yeah,
and that's something called Squad.
yeah,
So Squad is an open source project. You can find it on GitHub. There's a guy that works at Microsoft named Brady Gaster, and he
yeah,
built this. And it allows you to create personas and basically subagents. So
yeah,
you create a team, a roster, and then you define personas for your roster. So
yeah,
you could have someone that could be
yeah,
like table designer. You could have
yeah,
someone that is like focused on security. You could have someone that's
yeah,
focused on UI.
yeah,
And to my knowledge, I haven't looked at it the last couple months, but like that's
yeah,
something that's available in agent chat. It's not available in the
yeah.
CLI.
Okay,
But that's kind of
that's
an interesting concept too, where it's kind of like
yeah,
much like if you're on a project, you probably have a few folks, different roles, different
yeah,
responsibilities, kind of the same idea.
yeah,
And you kind of delegate authority to them with specific sort of expertise.
yeah,
Now, at the end of the day, like everyone is kind of created equal in this case, but it's
yeah,
more about how people have their own context. By creating the subagents, they can
yeah,
maintain their own context, so you're less likely to have like, context overflows
yeah,
where the sort of core agent starts to forget things.
yeah,
So that's another sort of thing that it might be worth checking out. It's like I said, it's open source.
yeah,
It's just something you point, coding agent at a repo and say, go ahead and install this, and it'll kind of
yeah.
take care of everything for you.
Yeah, that's interesting because that actually aligns with what Dwayne Robinson would say about setting up agents in Copilot Studio in terms of you want to have kind of a parent orchestration agent that, he would say is just, really kind of dumb. And then you've got child agents that have all the smarts to, yeah, so that would align with how you do things in Copilot Studio. So it looks like we're getting throttled on I'm not sure if this is web API.
Yeah, it must be.
So it's going to time out for 30 seconds and try again. And in fairness, I'm asking it to do things that it hasn't done before, adding the model-driven app to a solution. So if we just were doing the tables and columns, it would have been done by now. I've seen that circular reference issue before, just an hour ago when I was doing the deploy with this. So need to think this through more carefully. Awesome. It's thinking through this faster than I can read its updates.
Hmm. Now, one thing that, and I'm not saying that that's the case here, but if you do find that you get into a situation where you get stuck
Yeah,
and the agent starts going in a circular motion, that's when like considering changing the model can
yeah,
sometimes be quite useful too, right?
okay. Yeah,
Where it's just like especially maybe a newer model, something that might be more advanced,
yeah,
can sometimes, will outperform like an older model
Yep.
And sometimes that can be the breakthrough as well, but
Yep.
not suggesting that's the case here, but just as a general tip.
Yeah, I have seen that, particularly in Copilot Studio when using MCP tools. There were times where switching from one model to another, um, um, Maker portal, try examining the SDK. Very cool. So it's still thinking through this. This is really, I mean, it's really throwing the kitchen sink at this, trying to solve it for us, which is for existing stuff. Trying the SDK approach. Wait, we already hit that error. Is it possible for something like this for me to say, hey, let me break in manually. I will just add the app to the solution and then you can continue on?
Yeah, so that would be an option. Although it looks like it might be,
Yeah, it looks like it might have figured it out. Because
but
there
yeah,
are
you,
times where it's like, I don't necessarily want you burning credits when I can go and, kind of 30 seconds just add it.
yeah, but yeah, just the escape would do that.
Okay. No limitations. I can't work around with the web API. Okay, so maybe at this point we need to escape.
Yeah, escape will.
Um, Escape. Overthinking this. Yeah. Defer. It's the escape key it's not responding.
Might have to hit it like a couple times in succession. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so let's go in here and let's go to apps and let's add, oh, hang on. It's there. That's interesting.
Were there any other components that needed to be added?
Let's see. Now it's not letting us play the app. Let's edit it real quick. Let's just take a look. Okay, it looks like it's not added our tables into it. So let's add, so we had account. That's the one it created. What else did we have? Health review. Health review. And we had risk. Go. Let's save and let's publish. So I wonder if that's the issue it was running into. Um, all right, so we've got that now. So, okay, so let's come back to our CLI. And so now, how do we get this to continue?
So but what I would do is just, yeah, you can remove that URL there.
Yeah.
Just
So should I
backspace out of
say
that.
I've manually
Yeah, that's exactly it.
manually added the model-driven app to the solution? Continue with your plan.
Yep.
Your plan. Okay, and return. This is cool. So I can kind of break into autopilot where I need to. Oh, wow. It found my CSV just like you said. Very cool. Already well suited.
Looks like
Yep.
it
So
detected the existing script too, so it's not
yep.
going to go rewrite that.
Nice. All right. So it's importing the data. Yeah, I'm super impressed, Ken. Um, this is this is just massive stuff. It's just done that. Um, okay, it's doing it by table. Got it.
And yeah, like I said, if those were Excel files at this point,
It would be
the
writing
script would
Python
have
to,
been, yeah, to
yeah,
do that too.
yeah. No health review. Oh, nice. Okay, so it's told me who the customers are, open risks. Nice. So it's done that for us. Configuring the security model. It's not what they requested. They want custom roles. So it's
The other thing that's kind of
building our security
interesting
model.
is using this CLI just for data analysis as well,
Yep,
where you can use natural language to go ahead and issue queries
yep,
in business terms, and then even doing like that's sort of the opposite, right? So we used
yep,
Python to import data, through Excel, but we could also do the opposite, where we can
yep,
actually go extract data, generate scripts, Python scripts,
yep.
and create Excel files if we wanted to do some of our own sort of self-service slicing and
Yeah,
dicing as well. So you can do the opposite. You can pull in other libraries like chart libraries and build
yep,
reports and all of those types of things. So it's a kind of it's you're limited by your creativity pretty much
yeah.
is the bottleneck.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah, no, that was one of my key takeaways from MVP Summit was just always be thinking, how could we do this with an agent? Don't be limited by this is how we've always done things. Because it's opening up just exciting new possibilities. And I mean, when you think about it, when we've got tools like this that can maybe I need to add these roles manually so we don't looks like it's running into similar issues that it did with the model-driven apps. Maybe we just break in here. Add
This
privileges
should be
action.
fine, but
Okay.
it did say something about network.
Yeah, I wonder if just we've been hitting the web API too much.
Because this should be using the Python SDK. It looks like it's trying, unless, yeah, this should be using the Python SDK, I suspect.
Version history,
So this is just like your context window.
environment, throttling,
Oh,
security roles were already created in a previous run.
okay, so that was a network issue then.
Yeah.
Yeah, the compacting conversation history, that what that is like, so this agent's been running, right,
Yep.
for whatever, 20, 25 minutes.
Yep.
And you've got all of this, your context window is
Yep.
basically being used, consumed. And so what
Yep.
this is going to basically do is summarize that information
Yep.
so that your context window can still
Yep.
function properly and you don't start to like lose
Yeah.
information. So that's something that you can control. You can also explicitly make a call, but more
Yep.
and more like it's will sort of self-regulate from that perspective, and this
Yeah.
is also where if you do have like very big solutions, that's where those plans can come into place, right, where you
Yep.
can say, hey, go take this and sort of write the plan, write my spec,
Yep.
and then what you can do is like refer back to it. So like let's say you shut this thing down,
Yep.
Go away for a couple weeks, you come back, you want to make some changes, you say, hey,
Yep.
go take a look at the plan. It's kind of the first step. It'll then go do that.
Yep.
And you kind of best of both worlds where you're sort of using your context window more efficiently and you
Yeah.
have something that you can persist, and it's an artifact that you can keep in source control.
Yep. Yeah. Um, and what I guess one thing that's important to point out is that these will get faster the more experience they have. This is kind of the first time I'm asking it to do certain things. So just like a human, it takes time to learn. And as it got through the tables really quickly because I had it learn how to do that last night. And so with things like the security roles in the model-driven app, it's learning how to do that. And this will just get faster and faster.
Yeah, no, it is true. Just because it has less discovery and less, script generation that needs to take
Yeah.
place as well. So
Yeah. Um, okay, so it's adding security roles to the solution. Add it to the solution. Nice. Now it's creating our managed solution. Let's just do a quick verification here in the environment. Um, I don't see security roles in here. Okay, so it's doing the export. Oh, no, there they are. Okay, there's just a slight delay. Now, if we come here to our environment history, so we can see it's published and we see an export going on. And if we come here to our target environment, which is the Nathan MCP from memory, and we go to solutions and history. All right, so it's going to ask us to authenticate. So let's go ahead and do that. And let me just 2FA this. Okay, so it's packaged up a managed solution, and we should see our solution history update here very shortly. Now, when it's doing this, yep, there it is. It's starting the import. Now, Kent, is it using the existing, okay, so it's getting some failings. Is it using the out-of-the-box pipelines in Power Platform, or is it using a different mechanism?
no, I believe this would be using, and yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe this would just be using like whatever's in the CLI, the PAC
Yep.
CLI, to be able to
Okay.
go do that.
Yeah.
So
Because I guess my next question is, does this, now this is really cool. So it's failing due to missing dependencies, and it's going to go and fix that for us. This is kind of the bane of any ALM, right? Missing dependencies, and it's going to go and figure this out for us, which is amazing because I hate playing whack-a-mole with dependencies, and now we don't
yeah.
have to. Um, but I guess does this make kind of, for simpler solutions, we'll use the out-of-the-box Power Platform pipes. For more complex ones, you're going to use pipelines and ADO. Does this start to make those redundant, or is there still use cases where you would use kind of more traditional things like ADO pipelines?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like this one is Oh, what's the right way to put this? I feel like this one would be very subjective. I'm sure a lot of people have different feelings about this. I would say
Yep,
just in general, uh, like I think these coding agent tools can absolutely help you
yep,
create your CI/CD pipelines.
yep.
I would argue that they're probably best left in their own platform, right? So if that's
Hmm.
ADO or if that's GitHub, that is
Yep,
kind of the best way to go do that. I think you've got more traceability, auditability,
yep,
you can do human in the loop type stuff. So my perspective would be like those would be better to sort of have, but I think these tools are pretty wild in
yep,
terms of like constructing packages. Like
yep,
if we think about on the Azure side where you've got like ARM templates, those things are
yep,
super tedious to assemble. Now, could you go build those scripts using a coding agent and then go check those in? Absolutely. I think that would be a great use case for that.
yep,
Obviously, there's things that are kind of happening here around like solution packaging and things like that. Maybe that makes sense.
yep,
But I would probably lean more on sort of the existing sort of tool sets that exist in the platform to
yep,
take care of that. But as you could like, these are certainly capable of that, but
yeah,
it's just probably, I'd say a little bit on that right tool for the right job.
yep, yep. No, 100%. Yep. So we can see it's now trying again with its updated dependencies. So it'll take it a few minutes to pull this in, but yeah, I mean when you think about it, in under an hour, we have gone from a prompt, we've gone through a plan, we have built tables, we have built relationships, we've built columns, we've built forms, we've added columns to forms, we've created a model-driven app. We had to break in and do a little manual editing to the model-driven app, and that's something that be interesting to see if we can kind of get a skill around that into the agent for next time. But and then we've been able to we built a security model, and we've been able to package it in a solution and export it as managed, which again is kind of the preferred proper way to do this when you're moving from dev into a higher environment. And so we've done that all with a prompt and a coding agent and a bunch of skills in Dataverse, which is really, really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree. Like these are kind of was it planned? Was it no dress rehearsal here? So you are
Yeah,
going to run into little things, and that's absolutely going to happen. But that's where skills come into play, right?
yeah,
You use these tools to document sort of the best path forward, and then
yeah,
those become available for the agent, and then that works. The other thing you can do from time to time, especially when you've got newer, say libraries that are coming out, like maybe there's
yeah,
newer dependencies. This happens in Azure a ton, especially like say Foundry, where their
yeah,
surface is constantly iterating and evolving. Is you can also like take URLs from like well-known content
yeah,
places, like even GitHub repos, and say, hey, before you do this, go read this repo or go
yeah,
consume this. Another thing that's not bad actually, it's is the Microsoft Learn MCP server. So that's
yeah,
something that you can do here as well, where you
yeah,
can actually add that as an MCP server to your agent,
yeah,
and it will also tap into that. Now, it'll also do web searches and stuff like that. Those are good too. But
yeah,
where there are sort of good sources of information for your particular topic,
yeah,
you can point your agent at those sources and say, hey, go consume these.
yeah,
And it'll be leveraged
yeah,
like
yeah.
at runtime here. So another
I
tip.
I am a huge fan of the Microsoft Learn MCP server. So I've got my own agent with it. I use it multiple times a day. Just last week, I had this ADO ticket that had been open for like a month. And you know how you get those irritating ADO tickets where it's like, I don't want to deal with this. I have no idea. And I literally was like, you know what? Let's see what MC the Microsoft Learn MCP agent solved this irritating issue that was in an ADO ticket that I'd been, hoping would just go away for a month, and it solved it in 5 minutes. So I am a massive fan of that MCP server. It is kind of a no-brainer to add it to just almost any agent you're working with these days.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, this is awesome. So it is importing. It'll take a bit of time to publish, but yeah, I and sometimes you'll see it reflected here before you do in the interface itself. So it might need another 5-10 minutes or so. So, but yeah, I know uh, show output. So it looks like it's done its thing. So yeah, we can probably wrap there. Oh, look at that. It's published. It's done.
Yeah, there you
So we
go.
come over here to apps, take a look. And we've got our model-driven app in our target environment. Very, very, very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, pretty
So
cool.
no data in it, but we are ready to go. That is amazing. And we did that all in the GitHub Copilot CLI. It's given us a nice update here as well, told us everything it did. So one thing I will do to close the loop on this is I will ask it to create a skill for itself based on everything you've learned from this interaction. Create a skill so you know for next time.
Yeah, no, that's
So
the right way to do it.
yeah, awesome. Well, Kent, thank you so much for your time. This has been really exciting. And yeah, I can't recommend um, the Dataverse coding agents and skills highly enough. This is amazing stuff.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's been fun. And
Yep,
yeah, I'm sure people got a chance to learn a few things along the way too.
yep. Awesome. All right,
Cool.
thanks so much.
All right. I'll
Yep.
catch you later.
Bye.